So, what is law, really? I mean, is it just a set of neutral rules designed to keep things fair for everybody? Or is it something else? Maybe a hidden weapon in a huge battle for power? For more than a century, this very question has been at the center of a massive intellectual showdown. All right, let's get into it.
And the first shot, well, it was fired by the revolutionary thinker Karl Marx with this pretty explosive claim. He basically said, hey, law isn't a shield for the weak, it's a sword for the powerful. And that one idea, it kicked off a debate that would just echo through revolutions, political purges, and university halls for the next 100 years. So in this explainer, we're going to track this debate through 5 rounds. First, we'll hear the opening argument from Marx himself. Then we'll see his theory get put on trial in a real-world revolution. We're going to witness a head-to-head clash between 2 major Soviet legal minds. After that, a surprise plot twist from a French philosopher. And finally, we're going to ask, what does any of this mean for us today?
Okay, round 1. Let's start with the man who lit the fuse. Karl Marx. And you've got to remember, he wasn't just some academic in an ivory tower. He was an activist who threw down a radical challenge to the entire idea of law as we know it.
So who was this guy? Well, born back in 1818, Marx actually studied law before he jumped over to philosophy and economics. And his books, Capital, the Communist Manifesto, these weren't just for reading. They were calls to action that directly inspired the 1917 Russian Revolution. And get this, even after his idea kind of fell out of fashion, they made a huge comeback after the 2008 financial crisis. Kind of proves they still have the power to make us question everything.
To really get Marx on law, you have to see society the way he saw it. And for him, it wasn't some happy, harmonious community. No, it was a constant struggle. On one side, you have the capitalists, the bourgeoisie, the folks who own the factories, the land, pretty much everything. And on the other side, the proletariat, the working class, with nothing to sell but their own labor. For Marx, this economic fight was the engine driving all of history. It was the foundation, and everything else, politics, culture, and yep, you guessed it, law was just built on top of it. And that is exactly where law fits into the puzzle. Marx argued that the state and its whole legal system isn't some neutral referee in this class struggle. Not at all. He saw it as a tool, an instrument controlled by the ruling class to protect their wealth and their power. So from this point of view, law exists to keep the owners on top and the workers in their place. Now, Marxists have a really interesting term for the way most of us think about law: legal fetishism. It's this almost unconscious belief that a society just has to have a legal system to work, and that the system is somehow pure, floating above all the messy stuff like politics and money. Well, for a Marxist, that belief is a total illusion. It's a mask that hides the truth, that law is just another piece on the board in the game of power. But look, this wasn't just a theory to be debated in dusty books. In the early 20th century, Marx's ideas were put to the ultimate test. They became the actual blueprint for a brand new country, the Soviet Union. And just like that, the debate wasn't academic anymore. It was real. You can see how the story plays out on this timeline. It all starts with the manifesto in 1848. Then, boom, 1917. The Russian Revolution makes theory a reality. But that just sparked a new internal Soviet debate that, well, it had a deadly ending in 1937. And then, decades later, the whole question gets turned on its head in the 1970s. I mean, think about it. The revolutionaries in 1917 had a massive problem on their hands. You've just overthrown the people in charge. So what do you do with their laws? If the entire legal system was built to keep your oppressors in power, can you just use it for your own purposes? Or do you have to tear the whole thing down and start over? This question was a bomb that set off a huge debate. And right at the heart of that firestorm were 2 major Soviet legal thinkers. Their intellectual duel wasn't just for bragging rights. It would shape the future of Soviet law, and ultimately, it would seal one of their fates. So, in this corner, we've got Evgeny Pashukhanis, the Vice Commissar for Justice. You can think of him as the purist, the guy who truly believed in Marx's original ideas. And in the other corner, Andrei Vyshinsky, Stalin's powerful procurator general. He was the pragmatist, the one who said, hey, we need a new kind of law for our new kind of state. And here's where they clashed. Pashukhanis, the purist, was adamant law as a capitalist thing through and through. It grew out of markets and private property. In a true socialist society, he argued, it would eventually just wither away. But Vyshinsky, the pragmatist who had Stalin's attention, saw it completely differently. He said the state needed a powerful, permanent legal system, a socialist law, to act as a hammer to build the new world and enforce its ideals. And this debate did not end with a friendly handshake. Wyszynski's side won out because it fit perfectly with Stalin's goal of tightening his grip on power. In 1937, Peshakonis was labeled an ideological wrecker, and his opponent, Wyszynski, organized his execution. I mean, in the Soviet Union, this legal debate was literally a matter of life and death. So decades go by. The Soviet Union carries on with Wyszynski's version of law. But then, in the 60s and 70s, a new voice from Western Europe enters the ring, and he argues that everybody, both Peshakonis and Wyszynski, had missed the most important thing about law. This new voice was the French philosopher Louis Althusser, and he looked back at this whole debate and basically said, "You're all thinking about this too simply." He argued that law isn't just about force and coercion. Its real power, its much more subtle power, is its ability to shape how we think and what we believe. Its power as ideology. So here's Althusser's big idea. He said the state has two ways of keeping control. First, there's the repressive state apparatus, the RSA. This is the iron fist, the police, the army, the prisons. It's power through force. But, he argued, the state's real strength comes from its ideological state apparatus, or ISA. This is the velvet glove. Institutions like schools, the media, and yes, the legal system. These things don't force us. They persuade us to willingly go along with the way things are. So here's the kicker. For Althusser, the law does way more than just threaten you with jail time. It actively creates the world we see around us. It teaches us what's right and wrong, what's normal. It helps build our identity as individual citizens with rights and duties, and it makes the whole social structure feel totally natural, like it's the only way things could ever be. Okay, so after 100 years of this debate, from revolutionary pamphlets to Soviet firing squads to Paris classrooms, where does that leave us? What's the takeaway from this massive intellectual fight? Well, we've seen how the idea grew and changed. It started with Marx's raw claim, law is force. That was taken by Peshakonis to mean it's a temporary weapon that should eventually just vanish. Wyszynski rejected that, turning it into a permanent tool for state building. And then, finally, Althusser came along and showed us its hidden power as a system that shapes our reality from the inside out. And that brings the question right back to us, to you. When you look at the laws and the legal system all around you, what do you see? Do you see a neutral referee just making sure everyone plays a fair game? Or do you see an institution that, whether it means to or not, is always playing for one team? The Great Marxist Law Debate might be history, but that central question, well, it's never been more important.